Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Tejaswina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahi Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. May we be nurtured together, may we be nourished together, may we strive together, may our learning shine, may we not quarrel. So everything so far has been, up to this session, you could put it in the category of chapter 2 of the Gita. And so all of these various teachings that have been provided are is what Krishna has been giving Arjuna as a means to cause Arjuna to see the vision of the whole, see the vision of oneness. And of course Arjuna is a warrior, and his predisposition is mainly rajasic, so that means he is still not fully primed or capable to assimilate the knowledge. And by this point, Arjuna is still asking, well, you've shown me everything there is. And despite that, I still don't know what to do. And so this is the big question that we all come to life eventually. We say, well, I have the knowledge, but how do I put this knowledge into practice? How do I embody this knowledge and make it part of living daily embodied practice? Because Arjuna is a warrior, he's got a job to do, and Krishna is telling him about the self, and Arjuna is saying, well, how is this applicable in the real life situation? So that's where Krishna finally says to him that, okay, that's fine. I will now thus recommend you Karma Yoga. So chapter 3 is where we're now beginning. This is where the backup solution, you could call it, if the self-knowledge hasn't fully worked. So you can see how well the Gita is structured, is that even if the whole vision of oneness has been provided in succinct detail and it failed, there's still an alternative to cause that clarity, so that later on can be sufficient for what has been told in chapter 2. So now I'm just going to read you the beginning of chapter 3. This is from using Chinmaya's The Holy Gita. So far, Shri Krishna argued against Arjuna's decision not to fight, but to renounce the glory of success and retire to the quietude of the jungle, to live there the life of a monk, seeking the divine. In his arguments, at one moment, the Lord advised that Arjuna's duty was to work without getting himself preoccupied with its results. Krishna had also warned him, let not thy attachment be towards inaction. Okay, so what is this saying? So here it's saying that Arjuna obviously wanted to, as it says, not to fight. In other words, not to participate in the world, because it's just too complex and too big in the moment for Arjuna to fully assimilate and grasp. So Arjuna thought, well, I'm going to do the easy way out. This is what's commonly known in the spiritual world as spiritual bypassing, and that is not to do the full work from A to Z and just to go to the easiest work, which is just to, as it says here, to go to the jungle and retire to the quietude of the jungle, to live there a life of a monk seeking the divine. In other words, to retire from the world and just not participate in the world and just go, I'm the self, and contemplate self-inquiry, use Ramana's teaching, use all this Neo-Advaita, all these teachings, and think that's going to solve the problem. When in fact, that is exactly what's not going to solve the problem. And it's really fantastic how it's set up, is that there's no cheating in Ishvara's world is that if one chooses to bypass and just go the easy route, then what's going to happen is it's very commonly, it's not so common anymore. I actually don't know what's happening in the spiritual world. But we can use one example. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't think it's nice to mention names. But he got an epiphany, a certain vision of oneness, of the total. A very popular character. If you would like to ask me his name, you can do that after. I'm not going to say it in the class. And he quickly gained a following, a big, huge audience. And he taught for many years. Everything was fine. Everything, you obviously thought, I know it. It's solid, it's firm. There's no problem. And people are listening, so obviously there's a agreement. And very soon, or not so soon, I don't know how many years, he admitted, he actually said on his website that, quote, I'm going to paraphrase, I realized that there's a lot more work to do, so I had to stop the teaching. So he retreated back on himself, to work on himself. So this is what happens in the case of bypassing, thinking, okay, well, now there's this knowledge, the permanent versus the impermanent, the invariable versus the variable, and there's total clarity. That's all there is to it. Now I can just go back to the world and just continue the world's business as usual. Okay, you can, but it depends on how clear the mind is, right? Because the mind still has tendencies from the past, and those tendencies will feel attracted to the world. And little by little, they'll slowly start the mind's focus, take it away from discrimination of satya mithya, of the invariable and the variable, back into the variable only. That's the problem. So once again, that is why Krishna is advising Arjuna why he should not retreat to the jungle and do the easy way out of contemplating the divine. And once again, it's lovely that it's set up this way because nobody can really cheat. And if they do try to cheat, it's going to come back. Ishvara is going to find a way. It's going to come back one way or another, maybe through an indirect way or a direct way. Yeah. So that's why in Vedanta, we never stop the work. Even though the clarity is firmly established, it's all fine, we don't go, because that's arrogance to say, oh, I've got it. It's just, what is there to get? If everything is one, sarvam brahma, everything is a total. So there's nothing to particularly get. Even though there is a clarity of the invariable and the variable, there's nothing particularly to get. It's just a matter of knowing who you are and then still continuing amidst the world of activity. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with describing what karma yoga is. Actions which are performed without egocentric desires, and anxiety for its fruits, with an attitude of offering to the Lord, become karma yoga. So we got two parts here. Actions, obviously meaning any kind of action, whether it's through your thought, word, or deed. When they are performed without the ego is the doer, the sense of I. In other words, when action is performed without the ownership that I am doing this action, but rather the action is performed without being concerned of who the doer is, number one, and what is the result of this action, what is the result going to be of this action. Without egocentric desires, in other words, without an agenda. If the agenda which stems from the action is of what can I gain, what can I extract out of this deal, how can I benefit, then it's probably this, it needs to be looked at. It doesn't mean that one is not allowed to think like that, because let's face it, it's not like I'm not concerned about who comes or not. There's still a caring that you guys are listening, and you still care that someone's speaking and has a structure to it. So yes, there is still a benefit, an agenda, but it's not as in entirely about me. It's me, but it includes the whole. It's you, but it includes the whole. So that's what we mean by without egocentric desires. Or the anxiety for its fruits. In other words, without the anxiety or the concern or the worry or the expectation about how is what I'm about to do going to turn out in such a way that it's for my favor. Because well, all we're saying here is that that kind of thinking doesn't work. And here's why. Because when a person uses an action through their free will and they release the muscles and this falls, from that point onwards, there is no more control on your part. Because from now on, law of gravity takes over. That's what we mean by Isvara is the facilitator of Jiva's actions. See, I apply action, I drop, and then Isvara facilitated that action through its law of gravity, or law of reciprocation, or law of attraction, or law of so many other laws that are operational. That's what we mean by Isvara is nothing other than the one who facilitates the person's or the jiva's actions. Yeah? Okay, so where you do have control is whether I drop it here, or drop it here, or drop it there. But wherever you drop it, that's beyond the jiva's or the person's control. Prime the mind for knowledge assimilation. Silent, peaceful, sattvic mind, which is otherwise emotionally disturbed. Okay, once again, this is what we're speaking of, that if Arjuna chooses to go to contemplate the divine in the jungle, the irony is it's the easy way out, right? It's easier than fighting. No disagreement there. But the thing is, because Arjuna's mind is still, erratic, it's still agitated, if he goes or she goes to the jungle and contemplates and tries to inquire about the knowledge of the invariable and the variable in peace, it seems like he's got a good deal there, right? But not really, because the mind is so noisy, so erratic, that it's going to be constantly phased back into what if, what else could have I done to prevent? And I feel guilty, I feel this, I feel that. So that means first one needs to solve the issues and situations in life, and then by that, little by little, or amidst parallel to that, inquire discriminate between the variable and invariable. You see? So we're not talking about a checklist. First karma yoga, done. And now inquiry. Yeah? Inquiry amidst or parallel to karma yoga. That's the way of the Vedic life. Yeah. Okay, Karma Yoga, chapter 3. Arjuna said, "Your seemingly contradictory words confuse me. First you say, knowledge is better than action. And then you encourage me to fight. Tell me which I should do for liberation." In other words, Arjuna was confronted with two choices. First of all, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, no action can bring about freedom. But then, if I don't do action, then how am I supposed to discriminate? Because that's another action. How am I supposed to read and inquire? Because that's another action. So Krishna is saying here that there's actually no contradiction between knowledge and action. Could anyone tell me why is there actually no contradiction between knowledge and action, despite Arjuna being confused, which is why he's asking the question whether he should do knowledge or action for liberation?
Because one will influence the other.
Yeah, super. Good answer. I mean, think about it. If they're just applicable to different stages of life, right? Someone needs to meditate. Someone needs to, do work. Somebody needs to read, but they're all pointing to the same intention. So all that it's saying is that it depends on what is the temperament or the stage of one's life. If one stage is a noisy mind, then obviously that would imply more karma yoga and less inquiry. If they're a very peaceful, sattvic, tranquil mind, then obviously the ratio would be a lot more inquiry and a lot less action. And they always vary depending on the stage or the clarity or the lack of clarity of the person's temperament. Okay, so Krishna replied. Remember, Krishna is Atman. Krishna is just one who has self-knowledge, total clarity around what is and what isn't in terms of variable and the invariable. Krishna replied, I revealed two committed lifestyles when the world was created. This is what Isvara is actually saying now. If you were to ask Isvara, what at the time of creation did you imbue creation with? This is what Isvara would say. First, the pursuit of knowledge for those temperamentally suited for it. And second, karma yoga for those unqualified for knowledge. That's it. Now let's look at this in a context of the world. Just generally to give it some clarity in terms of category. Let's say, for example, you go to a spiritual world and you see tons of different people, temperaments, right? What is usually the temperaments if you were to divide it into just two categories?
Conscious and unconscious.
Yeah. Or you could say also one category is just all about action. Let's do more asanas, pranayamas, let's do qigong, tai chi chuan. It's all about pilgrimages, all about action, movement. Going to each meetups, all of just so much movements going on. And the other are they're all just settled. They're settled. The settlement is more like just relaxed. And they're into knowledge. It's as common every time you look at this in terms of dividing the two categories. So it doesn't mean that one's better than the other. It just means that one is in that stage, mostly applicable for knowledge, and the other is for the action. So that's why we cannot ever look down upon somebody's way because they're doing exactly what's applicable to their path in that moment. It's only leading into the next stage. In traditional Vedanta, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Now, including Raja Yoga, by the way, they all actually lead to the final path, to the highest path, which is Jnana Yoga. Because there's nothing you can do to be the self, because why? You already are the self. There's nothing you can do to get what you already have. Right? And you already have yourself in a form of the self-evident I. That's how you know you exist, because you know you exist. There's nothing I can tell you to say that you exist. You already know that. That existence is Satyam, Atman. Okay, so Krishna is once again saying two committed lifestyles. One for pursuit of knowledge and two for Karma Yoga. Obviously, we're here for the pursuit of knowledge. This is not a yoga class or not a movement class or some kind of meditation class. If that was, then that would be more predisposed towards, let's say, Raja Yoga, or you could also put it as Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, devotion. Okay, next paragraph. You did not gain ever-free, actionless awareness by the non-performance of action, nor can you gain freedom merely by renunciation of the results of actions. Okay, let's do the first line. You do not gain you do not gain liberation or full clarity by the non-performance of action. Why? Because by non-performance, okay, who is doing the non-performance of action? The ego, the doer. So somebody is trying to not do. You see, so it's still someone making a decision, I'm not going to do any action. So in other words, nothing really changed. The ego just made a claim that I'm no longer going to do anything because after all, Satyam is actionless and I'm just going to replicate the actionless by not doing anything. But who's doing all of that thinking and calculating and evaluating? The ego. So nothing really happened. Back to square one. Nor can you gain freedom merely by renunciation of the results of action. I'm going to read a little bit more about this statement. Okay, so you do not want. Okay, so you do not want freedom for that doer. You want freedom from the doer. That's the point. It's just as Lloyd has said. Can you get rid of the doer by action? No, because action only reinforces the doer. There's somebody doing the action of trying to know who they are. So that simultaneously reinforces the doer who's the one trying to get rid of. You can only do that by knowledge. So why can we only do that by knowledge? Because it's only a matter of discovering what already is. That's why we said Vedanta is praptasya prapti, which means that which is already present. Just like gravity. You don't need to do something to create gravity. You just need to observe and acknowledge the fact that gravity is already there, and then through gradual self-inquiry and discriminating, we come to accept what's already present. Your awareness as your self-evident I. Nobody can avoid action, even for a second, because the three qualities of nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas, illumined by the self, force you to act. That's a very super logical statement that it just pretty much erases any thoughts or ideas about trying not to do something, whether it's just resting in a cave or just having an overly aesthetical life, just a very quiet life. Because you see, as long as these three energies are operating, and they're always operating, it's as long also as the body is going to do actions in terms of thinking, maybe rajas thinking, that means thinking what to do, how to do it. Sattva thinking, that is contemplating knowledge, or tamas, even sleeping is doing. You're sleeping. So there's no question of not doing, just to make that clear. Yeah. In other words, there's no way out by not doing. There's no way out by trying to get into some state or some kind of experience, because even that experience was gained by a doer, the ego. So no matter what you do, the ego is always there. So that means we're not trying to discard the ego or kill the ego. We're just simply recognizing that the ego belongs to mithya. And that's going to keep operating whether the person has knowledge or not. That's freedom. So freedom's got nothing to do with trying to eliminate anything, because why are you trying to eliminate what is there as a functional, as a proper function? And not only that, but the ego is what gets you to sit down and listen. In fact, the ego and all of these functions, the mind and intellect, what gets us to calculate, think about this knowledge, and get a sense of this knowledge, which is all required for the full assimilation of the Vedanta.
So what brings us here tonight.
Yeah, so there's no question of trying to get rid of the mind or stop the intellect or get rid of the ego, as we commonly hear in the Buddhist tradition. You see, we're simply embracing them, actually acknowledging them, because that's what non-dual means. Nothing can be excluded, only understood that it serves a function, and then letting that go. Why can you let it go? Because you have a full clarity around what is invariable and what is variable. That's what moksha means, knowing the difference between the variable and the invariable, and never getting confused, never superimposing the invariable, the variable over the variable. That happens very often. For example, I'll give you an example of trying to superimpose the variable onto the invariable. Purification. We're trying to purify ourselves. Huh? Why? Because we inherently understand that the self is totally perfect. So there's a sense of I want to be perfect. And we superimpose my perfection onto the body and to the mind. So we do everything in our power to become better, more perfect, smarter, more intelligent. You see that? It's very common. Why? Because one doesn't know who they are. So they're superimposing the perfection onto something that can never be perfect. Because why do I say that? I don't mean perfect as in broken. I mean, you cannot have perfection in mithya, because only what is unchanging is perfect. You see, as soon as you have one shape, you call that perfect, but that shape's going to change. That's what mithya means, changing. So how can you depend on trying to put perfection on what is going to change the next moment? So it's an endless battle trying to perfect oneself if one doesn't recognize the nature of themselves as the non-changing. And they can let the imperfections go. They can let them be as they are, and they will never end, by the way. And not only that, but even if you do clear the imperfection, guess what? You're a servant for Isvara. So Isvara is going to implant a new nice thought, and that thought, since the three gunas are operating, is going to get you to participate in the world. More karma is going to be accumulated, and that karma is going to cause you to address new circumstances, and you're back into trying to then purify that also. So all we're saying once again in summary is know the difference between the invariable and never confuse that with the variable. That means you can still fully participate in the world with total clarity about who I am. All right. Nobody, we did that. You are deluded if you think that merely keeping the senses in check will keep the mind controlled. Okay, that's because, okay, question. Why is one sort of deluded or not entirely complete in their understanding if they entirely put all of their control in their senses? You know, like don't look at pretty ladies. your mind's going to get all contaminated. Why is that not a proper way of looking at it? Just whatever comes, tell me.
Because it's denying Ishvara.
Yeah, perfect. And also, besides denying Ishvara, in other words, they're rejecting themselves. You know, it's appearing, whatever appears, it's appearing in you. It's not appearing out there. We did this experiment with the reflection. Remember that? And then the light reflects. It enters your brain, right? I'm going to do this again. Where is this? Where is this object? Yeah. Yeah, simple. So the light is reflecting off the object, and it's entering your retina, and the retina, it's upside down, and then it enters the back of the brain. So that means it's in your brain. So now the question, in your subtle body. So now the question is, how far are you meaning that one which witnesses, away from this object? It's no distance. Yeah, so that's what I mean when it's all happening in you. There's no out there. It's just that we haven't inquired about this simple, very good Vedantic example, and it appears that things are out there, but they're not. The reason why one can be deluded is it's the mind's job to communicate with the world. It has to communicate with the world. That's how it operates. So, and because it's always exposed to views, to nice, pretty things, to smells, to sounds. So what's the point of trying to restrict that? Because everything's always exposed. Your mind is always exposed to new senses. So it's not a matter of trying to get the mind stop the senses, because the mind just naturally is always seeing the world through its five senses. Yeah. Okay. But if you control the sense organs with karma yoga attitude, you will gradually bring the mind to heal, to control. Do whatever has to be done because action is superior to inaction. Okay, so here it's saying, but if you control the sense organs with the karma yoga, okay, so what's the difference with trying to, in the old traditional style, just not look at things, be away from the world, versus the karma yoga attitude of controlling the senses? The difference is that, was it, you like what it said? Ishvara is all around. So whatever I participate with, the simple understanding is I'm simply participating with the entire ocean. And I am just a wave, one wave of that entire ocean. So no matter where I look around me, all I'm seeing is different forms of waves. And this one that's observing is also another form of wave. But whether it's this one that's observing is looking inwards or looking outwards, that is, if this wave is looking within itself or looking into those other waves, what's the commonality in this wave, the entire ocean, and all the other waves? The commonality is H2O. That pervades not only this wave, but the entire ocean, a metaphor for Ishvara, and also pervades every other single form. and also forms, when I say other ways, not only other people, but every other object. So everything you're looking at can be like metaphorically compared to a wave. But knowing it's all pervaded by that same substance, consciousness, therefore there is only consciousness. That's what Shankaracharya says in his bhashyas.
Can I ask you a question? Just, is there a subtle difference between the senses and the sense organs? Or are they the same?
Okay, the sense, there's external and internal. The external is sense organs. No, sense instruments. That's the external one. So an ear is sense instrument. The faculty which makes the hearing possible is in the subtle body. That's called a sense organ. That is why where the eye can be damaged, the physical eye can be damaged, the sense instrument, and you can still repair the eye, and then, if that's possible, or repair the ear, and then the ear is going to hear properly. But if the sense instrument was malfunctioning, then no matter how perfect the eyes are, or the ears, or whatever, the nose, then there will be no sense of possibility to recognize that sense, because the subtle body has a malfunction. One example of this is, it can happen in brain damage, for example, and certain receptors are not communicating anymore. And even though the person is looking at the world, and they're fully, they're seeing what everyone else is seeing, in their mind they're seeing like a delusionary image. There's a twist to that image.
Or under hypnosis, they can turn off your hearing.
Yeah.
Fire a gun, and a hypnotized person won't hear the gun.
Oh yeah, there you go.
But hasn't that changed the ear?
There you go.
The actual physical function.
Very good example. Yeah. See how help always helps. Okay, where are we now? So the Karma Yoga spirit, do whatever has to be done because action is superior to inaction. Okay, so what this means is that, first of all, we said since we're always acting, and the one who's, especially when we're acting from a dharmic point of view, from a knowledgeable point of view, see, you're always a role model for other people. Even driving a car, this is for Garrett, even driving a car on the road, you're becoming an example for other drivers. Now, it doesn't seem like I'm making much of a difference, but people learn through observing others, and this behavior is constantly reinforcing how others should act. That's why, if you had children, you know what I'm talking about is they totally copy you, whatever you do. Yeah. So adults don't change; they're still the same. So acting from a knowledgeable point of view, there is no way better than to, quote, change the world, than just to live that by example without imparting it verbally. Because then, disagreements come. That's why we don't speak Vedanta in public. We only speak it in class. Yeah. Or if somebody asks, then you can, slowly tie it in. But only when you're asked. Even maintaining the body is impossible without action. Well, that sums it up. Action is not avoidable. Okay, the Karma Yoga spirit instilled by the Creator at the beginning is the secret to success in life. So the spirit is the one that is built, this spirit is built into everyone, right when creation came. For example, spirit of sacrifice and service is what we're talking about. Spirit of taking care of the field, of the entire field, responding appropriately to the field, is built into every human being. For example, tree is even entirely of service to the entire world. A tree takes our dirty CO2 and it converts it into oxygen, which then gives life to species and helps the species grow. So this word sacrifice is not very liked to the West, because we think sacrifice is something that, I shouldn't sacrifice, I should get stuff. Why should I sacrifice? Life is hard already as it is, then why should I sacrifice? But that's a very incorrect way of thinking, because that's not only a small way of looking at things. but also it doesn't produce a lot of happiness, because it implies I'm small, so therefore the reality becomes very, very small. And so if one is not, that's what we mean by swadharma. If one's not living their swadharma, then life doesn't become very easy. There's a lot of tricks, and it just doesn't. It's not easy at all. So there's nothing better than one to find out and discover what are they supposed to be doing. And how do you do that? You simply ask yourself, what is most appropriate right now? Very easy. If somebody just had a physical situation, then instead of just witnessing and going, oh, let others help, then you act appropriately. That's called swadharma. Always acting appropriately in the moment. One time I remember, I was long time ago, I was like 17, and I was walking, just got out of the mall, and two people started to fight. And just instantly, I jumped in and broke the fight. And I was like, just for a second, I noticed like everyone's just witnessing, like looking. I'm like, why are you looking? Go and do something. So that's what we mean by swadharma. It's just doing what's most appropriate. Because if you don't do, then who is? There's a nice phrase that says, if it's to be, it's up to me. So that sums up the swadharma. Okay. This spirit, so what is this spirit? The spirit of sacrifice, as we said, which is instilled by the Creator at the beginning, is the secret to success in life, as I said now. So that means if one is looking for secret, what is the secret to success? I mean success as in joy and holistic living. It's just to understand this inbuilt attitude of spirit of sacrifice, giving versus grabbing. What can I offer versus what can I extract? Yeah. Honor the gods, in other words, the 5 elements, because in the Vedic times they were worshipping the 5 elements, which was a representative of Isvara, that control the objects with this attitude, and they will look after you. Honor Ishvara, acknowledge Ishvara. It is the one true path to liberation. But I say you are a thief if you take what comes without offering it back to the world. Those who eat remnants of the sacrifice incur no sin. Those who cook only for themselves incur only sin. Okay, now we're going to go back to this statement. It will satisfy this spirit of karma yoga, spirit of sacrifice. It will satisfy the one desire behind your innumerable desires. So there's a little bit of depth in this statement, is that, see, when somebody's chasing something in the world, they're doing it, why are we chasing things in the world? What's the reason? To be happy. Yes, perfect. And okay, now why do we believe we're going to be happy when we get it?
You think we're lacking something?
That's right, even better. Okay, so obviously, so that means that a whole bunch of actions in the world, whether it's to, for example, Friday or Saturday night, I don't know the proportion of the cars on a Friday or Saturday night, how many of those are actually going somewhere for a little bit of pleasure, for a little bit of desire, satisfaction, whether it's a date, whether it's see a friend, whether it's for a good conversation, whether it's, on a boyfriend, girlfriend. I mean, just how much petrol goes into this, right? So, and all of these desires, little by little, if you add them up throughout the entire life, are there, as Adrian said, in the hopes to be happy. But because one hasn't investigated what is the true cause, they just continue doing what they're always doing, which is continue chasing more desires. The problem is, each one of those little segments of desires only lasts so much. And they have a high and they have a low. They're, for example, a drunk person has a high and then they're followed by the hangover. So for every high, there's a low. That's what we meant from the beginning by saying samsara is a zero-sum game. There is no winning in samsara. If you think you won, you probably lost somewhere else in the future. If you lost, you probably won. When there's a breakup, there's something even better happening. That's what I mean. You know, we think, oh, everything's falling apart, but it's only opening up a new chapter for something else. Okay, so every desire for object is actually a desire for freedom. So when you want the object, what you really want is bliss of the self, which is free from desire. That's free of desiring, desired, and the desirer. Every desire you have is to please yourself. Even wanting to please others is also to please yourself. So what it's saying here is that when there is a desire, and I want to go and pursue that, the reason I want to pursue that is to be happy, as Adrian said. Now, why? Okay, so now what's the psychology of that? Because I believe that once I get it, I will be free of that desire. And I will feel a temporary relief from the pain of bearing that desire, which we inherently do not identify with. See, even a mosquito bite, I'll give you an example, tangible example. Let's say a mosquito bite right now comes and bites you on the arm. What do you start doing? You start agitating the desire to scratch, right? Why do you have an agitation to scratch? To relieve yourself temporarily of something that you know inherently doesn't belong on you. And then after you stop scratching, there's a little bit of a relief, isn't there? It's like, oh, I'm free now. But how long does that relief last? Not very long. It starts to agitate again, and so that I have to apply more action to keep satisfying myself, to be free of that desire. Same thing with the worldly desire, is that the common worldly man or woman chases these things thinking they're going to be free. Now they will, but they're temporarily, and it doesn't last. So what it's saying here is that it will satisfy all of your desires, is that when you know the nature of self as yourself, that is free of the three gunas, the first part, you know, in the beginning that we did in the class, and that is free of desires, then what is there to desire when I'm already free of desires? That's the benefit of knowing who one is and being firmly established in it, is that whatever desire comes, instantly it's seen as a desire. It doesn't belong to me, so I don't identify with it, so there's no need to act and then create more karma, which I have to then address back into the future. That's what we mean by samsara. My desire to act, I do act, creates more karma. I have to address in the future, and I do, and that creates more karma. Yeah. So it's a never-ending cycle. So that's what it means here by innumerable desires. So instead of chasing segments of desires, why not just go to the source, discover the nature of the self, the invariable, and contemplate that from the variable, and the desire problem is solved. So we're not saying get rid of desires, because the desires will never be gotten rid of. Desires are a natural byproduct of the rajas, acting. A new planet is desire. The sun rising, well, it's not the sun, it's the earth actually that moves. The earth rotating on its axis is a desire to rotate on its axis. It's all done by rajas. As long as the body lives, so will these desires. So we're not saying try to get rid of desires, it's impossible. Only accept that desires are there for a reason and stay in that knowledge of the invariable. And let the desires go, as they will go. Okay. Those who cook only for themselves incur only sin. In other words, one who is, of the selfish nature of what will I get, incur only sin. Because not only is it implicitly stating that I'm apart from the world, but also usually when one's acting out of their selfish greed, their selfish desires, it doesn't serve the whole. It only serves them. It may serve the whole, but not everyone. That's what we mean by that difference of being giving versus taking. Yeah, is that clear? Okay. Example of sacrifice in action. Living beings are born of food. We're talking about your bodies right now. Food comes from rain. And rain is born of sacrifice. In other words, sacrifice produces meritorious karma. Okay, living beings are born of food. See how that nice chain of events, something as innocent as rain falling, coming down and then producing the food which your mom and dad ate so they could be alive. And that food generated this amazing body, which is now, discovering what is the truth. All goes back to something as innocent as rain. Yeah. Or you could use another example, how the sun is sacrificing its heat, and then the heat is warming out the oceans. The oceans are evaporating to the sky, and the sky then gets cold enough and then falls down as rain. Rain falls onto the grass. The cows eat the grass. The cows make the milk. The person drinks the milk, and the person benefits from the milk. See that food chain all the way from top to, that's what we call sacrifice. So violating the sacrifice as a human being is actually a recipe for disaster, because a human being has that option, because we're given that free will to say yes or no. Yeah. So yes, we can get away with it for a while, but not for long. Isvara is going to find a way to, F-16s, shoot them down and get them right back into the world. This is very common, by the way, in some places. I know one, Tirumavalai, where you see young boys, very passionate with, orange sannyasin-like looking clothes, with a stick trying to replicate and be somebody else, Ramana Maharshi. That's the easy way out. That's what Krishna is saying. Don't go the easy way out. Go back into the world, finish your business, take care of your money issues, your wife issues, partner issues, whatever issues there are, and then once that's sufficiently taken care of, go and fully dive into the knowledge. Yeah. Okay. Sacrifice is extolled in the Veda, which is born of the eternal Creator. It sets the cosmic wheel in motion and resides in the heart of every living being. Those who fail to appreciate this spirit of karma yoga, sacrifice, are tormented by desire, pursue objects only to gratify their senses, live vain and wasted lives. You could look at this two ways, because even something as selfish can lead one to the light eventually. So we can always look at it from another angle.
I guess the way I'm seeing that sacrifice thing is to try and visualize that, especially when it talks about the rain and the water cycle.
Yeah.
Is that you've got the fluid, the water, which sacrifices to the gas.
That's right.
And then you've got the gas sacrificing back to the water.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way street.
It's total sacrifice.
And that's why it's a good imagery to see that if you're visualizing the sacrifice as a one-way street.
Yeah.
That's right. Terminal.
That's right. Just imagine water didn't want to evaporate. It's like, I'm just going to hold on to myself. Yeah. There will be no food, no humans. Yeah. And tree, if you say, I'm just enough of taking this CO2, it's dirty stuff, I'm just going to relax now. Yeah. We all die. Yeah. So this is just by replicating what's already present and replicating that spirit of sacrifice inbuilt into nature. From the Taoists, they also have the same with the yin and yang, how to balance the equally opposing, opposite but equal forces, how to live in harmony with that. Yeah. But in the Vedic model, we use the three gunas in terms of how to manage the harmony with the world, amongst with many other teachings. Okay. However, good sattvic people who take delight in and are satisfied with the self alone don't depend on objects for their happiness, and have accomplished everything that needs to be accomplished here on earth. They are free to act or not act. So this is another misconception, is when somebody sees a free person and they see, why are they doing so many things? Obviously they're free. Like, why are they still, doing this, that? They're free. It's not like that, because see, the free person, first of all, they're always going to act, as we said, through the three gunas. But why wouldn't one want to act when they're always acting, when there's only consciousness, and they are consciousness? It's like a wave is acting for another wave, and that wave knows it's the H2O, it's acting for itself, so why would you not act? In other words, we call this love. We're just unconditionally loving and still serving the society. So there's no such thing as having knowledge is suddenly backing away from the world. That's a little bit of a incomplete teaching on the part of the person who's actually attempting to live like that. Yeah. In other words, what we're saying is living a full, engaged life. Okay, they're satisfied with the self alone, don't depend on the objects for their happiness. That's what moksha is. Knowing the difference between the real and the unreal, or freedom, another way to put it is freedom from dependence on objects. What does that mean? Freedom from dependence on objects. Freedom from dependence on objects for my happiness. Why is that possible? Because one who knows who they are, they know that there is no greater bliss than just who you are. So how can anything be more attractive? Yeah, that's what Krishna can also mean that which is most attractive.
Because the objects are the variable.
Yeah, objects change, and they're not going to last. So, so you could say a wise person can even rationalize in the beginning, this too shall pass, this is all appearing in me anyway, and I am the witness of this. Without me, my presence, this will not be known. So why am I giving the joy to that object instead of just acknowledging from whence the joy is coming from me? So these are some of the rationalizations that a wise person would say. And they have accomplished everything that needs to be accomplished here. So that is the highest purpose for a human being, when all is said and done, is to know the nature of the self.
So that doesn't mean you can't enjoy an object.
You can still enjoy, yeah.
But you've got to recognise it.
Yeah. At that point, there's no need to... see, moksha is not about consciously, okay, I'm going to now enjoy, but I need to keep track of who I am. I need to be the invariable. See, moksha is just... You can't go back. Because once the understanding is complete, it's complete. So there's enjoyment, but there's a total certainty of who the I is, while there's enjoyment. Before that knowledge is firm, then there's a tendency to either go into the self or into the invariable or the variable, right? There's shift from one to the other. The common worldly man is all into the variable. The beginning inquiring man or woman switches one to the other. That's normal, okay? Moksha simply means that's switching because that's consciously done by the intellect, right? Because even if amnesia comes, right, the person's gone, the knowledge, it doesn't depend on amnesia, moksha. So once the knowledge is firm, it's firm permanently. Yeah, that's the only difference between the beginner inquirer and one who's firmly established in the knowledge. Therefore, always do action without attachment to the result and gain the highest good. Even if you don't need to act, you should act because you are a role model. What you do, people do. Yeah, Martin, you were saying without attachment, without expectations. Expectation is attachment. It's the same thing. Because if I have an expectation, what is the expectation present in the mind? So that expectation now gets plastered onto the object which I participate with. And if that object doesn't turn out according to the image of the expectation, then we have emotional problems. Yeah. Disappointment, exactly. And of course, as I said, you need to act because you're a role model. If they act in this spirit of sacrifice, they will not fall into unbecoming ways. Unbecoming ways means ways that are opposed to Dharma. For me, this is Krishna speaking. In other words, for me, the discriminating mind, Krishna is a metaphor for discriminating mind, by the way, because if you were to ask, where is the knowledge of the self known? Intellect. So Krishna in the Gita is a metaphor for the intellect. So this is what the intellect is speaking to Arjuna. See, this is not some battle. This is all in Arjuna's mind. And Krishna is his clear intellect. For me, there is nothing to be done, but I act ceaselessly for the well-being of everyone. This is a wise person speaking. If I am lazy, those who love and respect me will become confused and their lives will be meaningless. So, okay, so here what Krishna is saying is that he or she is free to act or not act. But they choose to act because, as we said, not only can you not, you're always acting, but you're a role model. So why not act from the standpoint of knowledge? You're a role model. Those who have this knowledge should not disturb the understanding of those action-driven people who don't, but by example should encourage them to act in this spirit. Yeah, this is a nice one. In other words, if we encounter someone who is decently knowledgeable, let's say in yoga, because it's a different world, by the way, yoga world, from the standpoint of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. If we suddenly start to, say how, this yoga, you have to move on, from the yoga business. You should, try Vedanta. It's not going to go very well at all. And it's not our place. They didn't ask, first of all. And that's just projecting what I would like. That's an expectation. That's an attachment. See, the one who's free has no need to project because they're free. They're free. They know it's mithya. It's changing. That person is not going to be there in 5 minutes when they say goodbye to each other. So why are they going to get caught up trying to explain anything? See, that's what a wise person is. So they don't get involved in these things. Only if somebody asks, "What is Vedanta?" Then you say, "Here's what Vedanta is. Here's some of the things that I like." But before that's why we also say never give advice to people because the timing's wrong. Huh? Never is a little bit of a generalization, right? It's a dynamic, right? It's really a dynamic.
But it's how you give that advice.
Yeah, we talked about Satyam Vadam, Priya Vadam, the courageous speak, but also pleasant speak. Yeah, I personally totally do not give advice. Only if the situation sort of is so specific that one needs to contribute. But if it has no context, then it's just like, why?
Just opens up a whole.
Yeah. So it has to have a proper. That's why we only teach this in class, because in class there's a context for it. Out of class there's no context. Even though it may be true what someone's saying, there's no context there. So it has no value. It doesn't stick.
If you see someone is suffering and you feel that, well, I've learned something that could help you.
Yeah, definitely.
You want to help them, don't you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're not saying, because now you could.
It's how you advise, not you don't try and unveil the whole
So
thing.
you try and advise in a way that doesn't where you're coming
confront
from.
their ego.
Yeah, but not advise as in, let me tell you what Vedanta says. And it's not, advise them in a normal situation, but not philosophically. For example, let's say a man and a woman get into a fight, and then the woman gets a little bit emotional, and then the man says to her, emotion is going to cloud your intellect, and we're not going to have a very productive conversation here. She doesn't want to hear that. So that's what I mean. Don't give advice in that. But in your case, Lloyd, absolutely.
No, I don't. I think it might be the other way around.
No. In your case,
to my wife and kids and working.
If there's a context, yes. Okay. So now we know what we mean. Okay. Actions are impelled by sattva, rajas, and tamas, seated in the body, mind, and senses. Deluded by the eye sense, ignorant people think, I am the doer. Whereas someone who understands the relationship between the gunas and action is free of their binding power and does not disturb the understanding of non-discriminating people. Yeah. So once again, we're going to this non-discriminating people. You see, there's, like Lloyd said, there's a certain level of advice, but going like way up, like this is all invariable. This is all variable. This is not going to last. Just let it go. That kind of advice, no. Deluded by the eye sense, ignorant people think I am the doer. Okay, so what this means is that if you just monitor conversations, first, it's just common everywhere, in every culture. The sentence always starts with I. Can't disagree with that. So there's all I followed by the verb. I went, I did, I said, I learned, I was in, I wasn't. So that's what we mean by that doer. So that the I is always linked to the action or to the activity, because that I believes it's the doer. So I did that action. Yeah. That's why when one knows, the more they're clear, the less these conversations are even interesting. It's like, I don't want to share what I did last night, what I did yesterday, or what I said. You see, it was just said, whatever was said.
Maybe I stands for Isvara.
We could say deluded by the Isvara sense. You could also say deluded by the sense that God controls everything, in that sense. And therefore I have no responsibility here. I can just let it all to, after all, God created this world. He created, all of this mess. So why should I participate and do something? That's another irresponsible thinking, because Ishvara is not the evil one. Remember, Ishvara is nothing but a facilitator of Jiva's actions. Remember, okay, I'll give you an example. What does it mean to say Ishvara is not the evil one? I'll give a metaphor. Let's say there's a car. The car is the body, the physical body. The driver of the car is the intellect, because that's the one who makes the decisions, right? And the petrol is Ishvara, God. Now, what happens if the driver drives irresponsibly and the car crashes? Is that the petrol's fault? No. Whose fault is it? Uneducated intellect. So it led the body, the physical body, to crash. So that means Ishvara is that which not only powers the sinner to be a sinner, but also powers the saint to be a saint. Yes. So that's why we say Ishvara is not the evil one. It's the decision, the uneducated intellect, due to lack of discrimination and what's right, that it makes these unfortunate, malicious decisions. Surrender your actions to me with a discriminating mind, free of expectation, and act. If you constantly practice karma yoga, you will eventually gain liberation. But if you become critical of this teaching, you will continue to suffer the pain of samsara. Gareth said a couple of sessions ago that there is a level of faith involved in this, and absolutely, there's a lot of faith involved. So the reason I say that is because some ideas initially, I understand, may not sound believable, or some teachings that like, I've never heard this before, it doesn't quite match. But see, Vedanta is all about revealing the common experience of everyone once it's investigated. So if it's not believed initially, one has to have faith at least in the beginning. That's the difference between one who succeeds at this or not. Is I call it childlike gullibility. They're just gullible to receiving. And so it works because we're sharing the Upanishads, we're sharing the scriptures which have sustained themselves for thousands of years, and it's the common experience of every enlightened individual. So why not put faith into that? Yeah. Okay, so that was just a comment for not becoming critical of the teaching. And also it says here, karma yoga will eventually gain, if you follow karma yoga, you will eventually gain liberation. Yes and no. That's a little tricky one, because karma yoga, remember what I said, action cannot lead to discovery of giving you something that you already have. Only knowledge can. So karma yoga, it's more accurate to say, can lead to moksha in a sense of purifying the mind.
With the knowledge.
So that knowledge.
Before about the knowledge and influencing.
That's right. So that the knowledge can take hold. So that the knowledge can take place. So therefore, karma yoga leads to liberation, and therefore we can say it also, therefore one gains liberation, but only if it's supported by jnana kanda, by the Upanishads. If not, then it's just going to end up into that statement, quote, living vain and wasted lives. Yeah. Because remember, the highest purpose of a human's existence on earth is to recognize who they are. That's it. Surrender your... Okay, we've done that. Even wise people act in harmony with their natures. Not to mention all beings. What use is control? So here it's saying that even one firmly established in knowledge, even they exercise the full appreciation of the laws of Isvara and participation in how can I be of service, how can I be of that spirit of sacrifice for others. And because if one, even with the knowledge, chooses not to do that, then guess what? The same thing happens as happens for an ignorant person. They go out of harmony, and that causes pain. That causes the mind, to entertain dirty thoughts, to entertain thoughts that are not entirely conducive with peace and tranquility and love. Yeah. So I just keep stressing this journey never ends. You look at wise people; they're totally active, always learning, always reading, always teaching, always discussing, never stopping. Yeah. Except the attitude is now different. It's no longer to get something, it's just out of love to share, because it's so delicious to express the inexpressible in the form of words, or to express the invariable for others to hear about. Yeah. Okay. Longing, that is desire or craving. Longing inheres in the senses and their objects. May you not come under its spell. It is an enemy. It is better to do a second-rate job on your own dharma than first-rate job on somebody else's dharma. Death following your own dharma is preferable to life following dharma of another. Following the dharma of others is fraught with danger. I'll put an example here. If you know Bill Gates' story, he was funded by his parents, and they wanted him to be a lawyer. And he went to Harvard, and he was studying law. But Bill Gates had a passion very early, I think it was since 12, for computers. Now imagine that he followed the dharma of his parents to be a lawyer. In that case, it would be better to die than to continue being a lawyer. That's what it's saying. Because Ishvara hasn't assigned you, see, everyone has a specific strength in the world. And if that strength is not exercised, then there's not going to be a full potential coming out. And there's not going to be a full service of the individual of the highest good for the world. So here it's a very strong cautionary message is that one needs to be attuned to their dharma. What is my dharma? Is this what I absolutely need and want to be doing, versus is this something that somebody else told me and I'm doing for the sake of entirely out of survival, or entirely out of satisfying my parents, or entirely out of trying to prove myself to the world. It's better to die than to do that. Yeah. In other words, have to do what's true for you, following your impulses. Don't follow others' instructions or expectations of you. This is also common in relationships where the two partners will stay longer than they should. See, their swadharma in the beginning, they got along very well, but during the course of their togetherness, the swadharma of each person changed. And now because they've got attachment or expectations, then it's hard to let go. And the longer they hold on, the more they're not living each other's swadharma, because they're infringing, they're overlapping each other's swadharma. So one has to, in that case, make a call and just move on. Otherwise, because they love each other, they want to satisfy each other, and so it hurts not to please them. But every time we please them, then we're not fulfilling our dharma. We're taking time on there. That's why it's important to have total compatibility, and and go with that. So sometimes it's time to make a call. Yeah, even with close friends. All right. I'm going to do a little bit of the bottom to introduce us to the three gunas. Arjuna said, what is that terrible force that causes self-insulting actions even though there is a strong desire to the contrary? So what this means is that sometimes we act in contrary to our own good opinion about ourselves. We know what is right, we know we should, we have total idea of what is the right way to go, but we still don't do that. We still act contrary to what we know is right. We contradict our own inherent knowledge of what needs to be done. So that's what Arjuna is now asking, and this is applicable to everyone, of course, humans. Krishna replied, Rajas produces desire and anger. It is a great glutton, greed, and an inveterate, in other words, a habitual sinner. Know it to be an intractable, a stubborn friend, stubborn foe. Just as fire is often covered by clouds of smoke. Imagine a fire covered by clouds of smoke. Okay, let that go. As a mirror may be covered by dust. A mirror covered by dust. Let it go. Or a fetus hidden in the womb. Self-knowledge similarly is hidden by desire. You see what they're doing here? They're using these three wonderful examples of smoke, fire, equivalent to a mind that is predominantly sattvic. You see, if you look at smoke, it's very easy to just blow the smoke and you can see the fire. There's not much effort there. If you take a dust on a mirror, it's much harder to wipe that dust off a mirror than it is just to go and blow the smoke away. That's rajas. You need more work to purify the mind. Sattva is very easy. Just meditate, meditate, meditate on the knowledge. Very easy to firmly establish. And then tamas, which is the farthest from clarity, is like, in this case, the fetus covered in the womb. Okay, I'll give you now an introduction to the three gunas. How are we feeling so far?
Yeah, good.
Okay, good. We can go on for another 10 minutes. Okay. This is the introduction, a very simple introduction to the three gunas. We will revisit this in more detail as to how to manage the three gunas. Let's talk about sattva. As we said, covered by a fire covered by smoke, and it's easy to remove because you just need to blow it away in a metaphorical sense through meditation. And here's some qualities about those whose minds are predominantly sattvic. Noble, in other words, they're always, there's depth in their teaching, there's depth in their statements, there's depth in what they say. Creativity, they're highly creative. This is if you're an artist or a graphic designer or any kind of builder or programmer that involves technical drawer, any kind of work, architect, that requires a lot of sattva. Yeah. Equanimity, in other words, just the sense of calmness amongst different situations. Serenity and pure. So these are just some qualities of a sattvic person. So if you resonate with any one of these, then that's sattva. It's best or most useful for contemplating the self. That is discriminating the invariable from the variable. And on the outside, it looks like there's a lot of activity on a sattvic person. If you look at any inventor of our time, like Edison or Tesla or Mozart or Beethoven, they were constantly composing and creating their craft. Or Tesla, right, inventing something. So we think, my God, they're totally rajasic because rajasic is activity, but they're not. You see, they're creative, they're inventive, they're clear. There's a lot of depth in their craft. So this is what we call a sattvic person. On the outside, it looks like there's total activity, but it's actually total. On the outside, it looks like they're not very active. In other words, they're just sometimes they're just sitting in the office or not doing very much. But on the inside, their minds are constantly engaged. Yeah. You can also go the other way. They're also active, because they just enjoy their craft. They enjoy their inventions. Thinkers, poets, Rumi. You guys know Rumi? Yeah. And they appear inactive to others sometimes. Like, just a poet has a very quiet life behind closed doors and not much, but a lot of engagement with the intellect and thoughts. Solution to establish more sattva. Contemplate and meditate on the self. That removes the last traces of any confusion. So the last, you could say, the practical last stage to firm establishing of this knowledge is contemplation and meditation. They're the same thing. Most people, by the way, statistically, get this knowledge by listening, not through meditation. That is closed eyes. And when I say meditation, also meditation is inquiry. It's the same thing. Yeah. Okay. Rajas. This is your passionate and egocentric folks who are just, what can I get out of this? And it covers the self like a dust on a mirror, and it takes effort to wipe off. So any kind of, dancers, or let's go out, party, let's go have fun, all of these qualities are required and possible because of rajas. Yeah. And you'll also see that for teenagers, they're very active. Why? Because a lot of rajas, non-stop. Qualities, overpowering desire and emotion. Yeah, that's what Arjuna was having a problem. Desire for expectation, how this is to turn out, or desire for knowledge. And at the same time, overpowered by emotion of seeing his two friends on the other side, Drona and Bhishma. So when the emotion is high, the intellect goes down. You guys know that? When emotion is high, we're not thinking straight. Yeah. So qualities of rajas is passionate, which is also agitated. Whenever there's passion, it's actually an agitated mind, which is quite funny because we find passion quite sexy in the world. A passionate guy or a passionate woman. Yeah, it's actually just an agitated mind. Not necessarily, but in most cases. Stormy and ambitious, like Silicon Valley, go-getters, high achievers, a lot of rajas, high-profile businessmen. Activity, it's like a fan in motion, a lot of movement. And lastly, okay, so the solution, how to convert, because see, your whole point here is to convert rajas into sattva and tamas into rajas. In other words, tamas into rajas and rajas into tamas. Sorry, rajas into sattva. That's the point here. See, there's a teaching of practicality, how to use this in one's life. Why? Because you need sattvic mind for, as we said in the beginning, for contemplating the self. Okay, so now here's a solution how to turn a moving rajasic mind into a sattvic. Redirect activity to Isvara through karma yoga. That's an example of still in the world, but no matter what is being done, one's vision is always on Isvara. Yeah, why? Because you and Isvara are inseparable. Remember this, we said jumper, wool, they're inseparable. So if I put my eye on Isvara, I'm also putting my eye on myself. That's the idea. And tamasic, this is a lethargic, tired, dull person. You've seen teenagers who speak very like, I don't care, man. I don't know. Just like apathetic. There's no much life there. This is where there's the excess tamas. So it covers the intellect and it covers the emotions. So they're numb to the environment. Very vicious and egotistic. Also, it covers the self like a fetus in the womb. And it needs a lot of time and patience to purify. Very interesting is you'll notice around 8 o'clock onwards, even 7 onwards, what do we most say as a worldly person or woman? Let's go out. when there is excess tamas, then the body and the intention, the desire is for tactile sensation. So that one wants to engage and experience pleasure. So that's why we say, let's go out. Let's go out. And when we say that, what do we mean? Do we say, let's go out and build a house? No. Do we say, let's go out and conversation of how to change the world? Let's go out and build something? No. Let's go out for a date, for a dance, for a nightclub, for enjoyment. Huh? Yeah. Tamas is, so that we all go out and tamas is there. And what happens during the night? Not much intellect. Huh? Very easy to converse, very easy to talk. But you can see how this tamas predominant changes people's behavior. Yeah. About tamas, it's inactivity, it's motionless. So as I said, it's apathetic, like just lethargic, tired. And some qualities are dullness, carelessness, always making mistakes, forgetting things, not being careful, inactive, lazy, procrastinating, not willing to go all the way, always stopping, doing just a little bit, not going all the way, inertia, not moving, stubborn, laziness, and they lack purpose in consistency, that is being consistent with their sadhana, with their practice, but also their conversations are very shallow with the tamas. They can be shallow. Yeah. Now, the important thing to note here is nobody is just tamasic, sattvic or rajasic. They're always acting in different proportions, you see? And also it depends on one's vasanas or samskaras. Because if the samskara is to not take part in arguments, which requires a lot of rajas, if the samskara is not to take part in that, then obviously that's going to preserve more sattva. And therefore, you're going to end up being a much more person who people say, well, you're just creative all the time, you're just noble. You see so how even changing your desires affects the kind of guna that affects the mind, and that guna reinforces that behavior, right? So for example, if the behavior is to have fun, a lot of fun, and go get drunk, then that's rajas. Obviously, you need a lot of energy to go out, right? And then drink alcohol, and then that clouds even more tamas. Yeah, and that adds what kind of thoughts? Very shallow, talking about worldly objects, something that's easy to talk about. There's no depth. So that means one's own actions reinforce the kind of guna, and that guna reinforce the kind of future actions they engage in, or have, or participate, or experience. So it's all linked. Yeah. Some of the solutions is to shake off tamas is with exercise or movement. That's why one common way, if you're into Tai Chi Chuan or Qigong, if one feels tired, they got two choices. One, go to bed. Not a good idea, actually. It's not the best way. It can be. They say take a nap, that's the best way. But it's not the only way. So play around. There's a way of certain exercises, breathing exercises, meditating. I meditate for 20 minutes. I can go on for an extra 10 hours. But if I go to bed and I wake up, I'll wake up tired. So you got to experiment with different ways how to get yourself out of that lethargic. Some drink coffee, it may not be the best way. You see, pranayama may work. There's breath of fire things. So this is where you can engage and look for some energy building exercises. Yeah. But the whole point here is to snap yourself out of tamas through different activities, as I just discussed, from tamas, so that you can go into rajas, and then from rajas purify that overstimulated desire and passion and wanting to get out into the world and just be everywhere. Purify that slowly, as we said, through looking at everything as Isvara. And then that's going to eventually get the mind to a sattva. And a sattva mind is absolutely required, compulsory for discrimination of the real from the unreal. Okay, so now we have an introduction how powerful and how useful these rajas are once understood and seen how the whole world is actually under the influence of one or the other. It's not used to judge people, by the way. It's the worst way to use it. It's just for your own self-management. Yeah. Yoga, for example, what's the word of yoga? Is that tamas, rajas, or sattva? When I say yoga, I'm talking a lot of movements and a lot of
Hatha yoga, you mean?
hatha yoga, asana, pranayama, pilgrimages. Rajas, yeah. You have a lot of young people in yoga. Yeah, because they need, but they're doing it better than going to nightclub, for example. They're channeling their excess rajas into something that is going to condition their minds a little bit more towards more noble, something more noble. So we never ever judge or criticize someone's activity because it's the best they have in that moment. Yeah, we just honor them. But this is all for you. This is your own teaching. Okay, let's close. Sarve bhavantu sukhidaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shantihi. May all be happy, may all be free from illness, may all behold good things, may no one suffer. Peace.